sports that I played, the combination of all of that, my perception was that vulnerability was a weakness. You don't talk about those weaknesses, and you suppress those feelings, and then you man up, and that's what men do. And I bought into that, thinking, okay, this is how I do it. But I grew up with a lot of guilt and shame, because guess what? On the inside, I was imperfect. And on the outside, I was trying to be perfect for everybody else, for my church leaders, for my coaches, for my parents. And anytime I had a weakness or I sinned, I felt so ashamed of who I was because I didn't know how to separate doing something bad with being bad. When I did something bad, I felt I was bad. When I did something evil, I felt I was evil and disgusting. And as a kid, I grew up with that vicious cycle, that the unhealthy mentality of defining myself by my mistakes. And I grew up with that. And so what I decided to do was, you know what? Anytime I confessed or someone found out about my weaknesses, I couldn't take it. And so I would just pretend it didn't happen. I wouldn't tell anybody. And I just thought, you know what? If I beat myself up more, and I discipline myself more, then I won't ever make a mistake again. But guess what? I did. Because I'm human. And as a teenager, growing up in the 90s, I was a normal teenager kid. And guess what? I got exposed to pornography. And in my religion, I was taught pornography is evil. It's sinful. And I know that this might be uncomfortable for some of you, but for me, it took me a long time to be able to talk about this openly on a public stage like this. But right now, I own my story, and I embrace vulnerability as a strength. And my hope is to give some of you out there courage to own your story. It's scary to step into the arena like Brene Brown talks about. But it's worth it. It's worth it because you're finally going to live an authentic life, and owning your story, makes you free. And it took me a long time to get to this place. But for me, the way I saw pornography was this forbidden fruit syndrome, where I knew it was bad, I knew I shouldn't touch it, but I wanted to touch it, which made me want it more, right? And so it created this vicious cycle of, okay, I have no one to talk to about this, so I'm just going to secretly do it, but beat myself up on the inside, but pretend like, hey, I'm happy, I don't do that stuff. That's disgusting. Who does that, right? And it's super unhealthy. And when I got married, I hid it from my wife. And on the outside, it looked like we had everything. I was on TV shows like Jay Leno and Dr. Oz, and this was all happening during this time. And I'm going to tell you guys a quick story of how everything went down. In 2009, I went on a business trip for 6 weeks to Denver, Colorado, and ended up having an affair. And I never in my life would have imagined that someone like me would do something like that. And the night before I left, my ex-wife had a dream that I had an affair on her, and she was crying. I still remember this. She was crying, and I looked her in the eye, promised her I would never do that, and guess what? I did. So you can guess how I felt about myself. How much I hated myself because of that. Because I promised I wouldn't do that, but I did it. And here's what I realized. I couldn't figure out for a long time why I did this. Why I was happy in my marriage. I had a good sex life. We had nothing. There was no, complaints. Why would I do something like that? And I finally realized that when you hate yourself, and when you come from a place of self-hate, and you don't have an outlet to talk about it, you tend to do failure-like things when you see yourself as a failure. And I saw myself as a failure my entire life. I saw myself as a failure, and you tend to self-sabotage when you do that. And so for me, I saw myself as a failure. I'm like, well, I'm already a failure. I'm already lying about this. Why not lie about that? And so for me, figuring that out was what helped me eventually get out of this whole defining myself by that one moment in time. I was afraid, you know what? I'm that person that had the affair, and that's who I will always be the rest of my life. And I was like, no one's ever going to want to love me. I'm not worthy of love. My life's over. That's what I thought. That's the story I told myself, right? And eventually my wife found out about it. I confessed to her. It was awful. She was heartbroken. This was her worst fear. And it came true. And I was the cause of that. And so I wanted to show her that I could change. But looking back on it, if being totally honest with you guys, it was for prideful reasons. I wanted to prove to her that I could change, but I also was so worried about what other people would think of me. I was so worried about what my family would think of me, what my followers would think of me, what my friends would think of me. And I was like, you know what, let's just keep this between ourselves, and I promise you I can work on this, I can change. So I went to, an addiction recovery program to help me. And that helped normalize it for me. Seeing other men that were just like me, that were normal dudes and dads, good people, but suffered through the same thing of that guilt and the shame of, looking at pornography and feeling so disgusted with themselves. And I saw other people, normal people, just like me, so that helped normalize it. And then we went to counseling, and that helped a little bit too. And I was like, hey, maybe there's some hope here. But we went through roller coasters of ups and downs, and things got better for a minute, and then they got worse in an instant, And then it got better for a minute, and then, we'd watch a movie, and there'd be infidelity, and it would trigger all those old emotions. And so we just suppressed those feelings, and pretended like it didn't happen. And so about 5 years later, I met this life coach. Yes, she stuck with me for 5 years. I don't know how she did that, but she did. And we're both grateful that she did, because it ended really well for both of us. Well, I saw this life coach, and this life coach, her name's Catherine Dixon in Salt Lake City, Utah. If any of you ever want to use her, she's changed hundreds of my friends' lives. She was the first person to teach me how to love myself. No one else, my parents, my church leaders, I didn't learn how to love myself. She was the first person to change my perception of who I was, and me realizing that I wasn't defined by that one moment in time. And once I had that hope, that I had that self-love, everything changed. I realized I needed to let go of my marriage. Why? Because I'm holding on for prideful reasons. I'm killing her by holding on, trying to not let her go, saying, no, we need to keep fighting, when in reality it was killing her and it was killing me, because I was trying to prove to her that I had changed. I had tried, everything I could to prove to her, but she didn't trust me, and I don't blame her. It's not up to me whether or not she trusts me or not, right? I don't get to choose for her. And I learned that I had to let her go, and it was so much better because when we did divorce, we did it amicably, and we were in a good place emotionally. We were able to let go of that. And if you guys ever want to, if you guys have the time, go listen to episode 100 of my podcast. It's called The Fit to Fat to Fit Experience. And then listen to episode 101. Episode 100 is all this in great detail. I have like 3 minutes left. And then episode 101 is Lynn's story. Her name's Lynn. It's her story from her perspective for anyone that's been on the other side of this, of how you overcome it, how you let go of it, and how you move forward. Because no one would blame her to stay in this bitter, angry place where she was wronged. And no one would blame her. But guess what? She's the one that suffers. So she had to learn to let go of this. And if you want actionable steps to do that, please go listen to her episode. So we decided to get a divorce. For us, that works. It doesn't work for everyone that way, but we're still friends to this day. We co-parent really well. I'm friends with her boyfriend. We're on the same team because we put our daughter's interests in front versus our ego. And the biggest thing that I took away from all of this is embracing vulnerability as a strength, which I know is really hard to do, but for me, what it took was reading books by Brene Brown, Daring Greatly. If you have not read Daring Greatly, I highly recommend that. Rising Strong, The Four Agreements, another book called Loving What Is, Ego is the Enemy. All of these books helped me slowly start to change my perception of who I was. And once I learned that I could love myself despite my past, and that I don't need to define myself by that one moment in time, all my other relationships changed. Because now I was coming from a place of self-love versus self-hate, and I saw every other person from a different light, a different perspective. And that's what it comes down to, guys, when it comes to changing your perception, is if you can learn to change your perception, not just about, this type of topic, pornography, affair, lying, cheating, but if you change your perception of your situation, for health and fitness, for financial situation, for your relationships, your whole life will change. Because what happens, we live in this story that we create based on our perception. And that story becomes a reality. Even though that story isn't necessarily true. In our head it's true because of our experiences and our perception of the situation. But once you can learn to change your perception, you change that story, you change your reality, you change your life. And I know I'm making this sound super simple, but it's totally possible. And I promise you that's possible. So let me give you guys 4 actionable steps for transformation with anything in life. The first part is you have